Kia ora, this is me. I'm being a sidekick to a child who is getting a knot, which is somehow up a tree. I'm done. I have my dream job. I work at what is often called a nature school for a non-profit organisation called Everyone Out. Doing an outdoor free play holiday program, I am freed from the curriculum and exerting control over children's time, meaning I concentrate fully on social emotional learning, basically ensuring that everyone has a good time. It's awesome. We cater for a lot of neurodivergent students, including some who have been excluded from other holiday programs. Each day there'll be a mix of kids aged 5 to 13, some that I've never met before and some that I have known for the 7 years I've been involved in the program. In that 7 years, there have only been 3 behaviour incidences. 3. All these children, the ones who come with notes, have been invisible, in that they are just part of the happily playing mass. They are being successful. The only help needed has been the odd reminder and the occasional tool to help everyone to make allowances for other people's differences. And when we have such an age range, this is easily discussed. These are the hands of a child who has a full-time teacher's aide at school for autism. She's making clay. Her project became one that ended up involving many kids with a whole production line, including shops. This child even did homework after a bamboo battle that was in the edge of her comfort zone. She still chose to participate. By coming in the next day, she gathered those who wanted to battle together and reinvented the United Nations to resolve any conflict. All this without adult involvement. So why does Everyone Out work for these children? I think it is because they're free, following their interests and directing their own lives. I have become even more convinced over the last 7 years of the value of self-directed education. To quote what Pippa Biggs from Include Me New Zealand said about teaching challenging students, every one of them needed their own individual learning pathway. It was about how they learnt and not about what they learnt. It was about how they achieved and not what they were achieving, and whether that success made sense to them. Self-directed education is a philosophical, biological, moral and pediological stance, and it isn't new. Homer Lane ran a little Commonwealth residential school for difficult young people in 1913. A.S. Neil set up the Summerhill School in 1921. It's still going. Ivan Illich published Deschooling Society in 1971. There's John Dewey and his experimental school, John Holt, Peter Gray and the Sudbury schools in the US, and of course the choice to homeschool, in particular unschooling, which even in New Zealand is increasing. Apparently, Tolstoy in 1861 was an advocate. The Alliance for Self-Directed Education defines self-directed education simply as education that derives from the self-chosen activities and life experiences of the learner. This means the young person has control over what they learn, when, how, and when to stop. This, of course, changes over time, as people do. For instance, learning to play an instrument, the natural change that goes from playing with it to the hours of practice required for mastery. Self-directed education is not agency tokenism, like giving children choices on what book they read or their project topic or tailoring their interest into worksheets, but total choice. Freedom. Some philosophical underpinnings of self-directed education are that play is the work of the child. Maria Montessori in 1936 saw a child's play as work equal to that of what adults did in giving their lives a meaning. Subjectification as a purpose of education from Gert Biester. This is our freedom as people, our freedom to act or to refrain from action. The difference between a child choosing to do the dishes because of what it means for themselves in the world rather than because of what they have been told to. It is an understanding of qualified freedom, which cannot happen if in an environment where agency is a pretense. Intelligence, what we value as compared to what schools test for, and the results of interpolation. We may say to a child we value all kinds of intelligence, but our testing teaches them otherwise. This is a drawing by Susan T. Kahurangi King, an international artist from New Zealand who also just happens to be autistic, and she stopped talking at the age of 8. Professor Welby Ings, who learnt to read at 15, has written about the nature of intelligence, what we value, and its interaction with the narrow definitions from schooling. He tells stories of school maths failures who astound with their practical mathematical reasoning. Self-determination theory, which is where our psychological need for autonomy and competence are what sustain intrinsic motivation. So any intervention like testing, evaluation, changes a student's motivation. McMahon and Portelli emphasise that there is a difference in the quality of a student's engagement if they are exercising this intrinsic motivation. Biological. We understand that children develop differently when they have growth spurts, who gets taller first, etc. A tenet of self-directed learning is that because the child is leading, the learning will follow the path of their development, those bits we cannot see inside their bodies. Alison Gopnik argues in The Gardener and the Carpenter that self-control systems take time to learn and develop, and this used to be done in mixed age groups where failure mistakes were totally acceptable and inconsequential, more of an apprenticeship model of observation, modelling and then practice. We are born learning machines. Ken Robinson, in that famous TED Talk, says we are born creative and curious, but schools with their right and wrong answers have a negative impact on this. He also wrote a book called Creative Schools, in which he advocates for self-directed education. Then there are the pedagogical differences, like in the role of the teacher, which I'll come back to later. Then in play-based learning, which I see others are presenting on. And the emphasis on communities of learning. Chris Watkins's paper talks about the difference in outcomes when a class is a community of learning, constructing knowledge with others, and the importance of agency in this. Then there are the moral reasons. This is a quote from Guy Claxton. It varies a lot in different countries, but maybe it's usually somewhere between a third and a half of kids who spend 12 years going through an experience, a daily experience of failure and incompetence, and come out with almost nothing worthwhile at the end of that experience. And in civilised countries in the 21st century, the idea that that is somehow acceptable is honestly appalling. To quote Daniel Tammet, who was the author of I Was Born on a Blue Day, I was never comfortable at school and rarely felt happy except when left alone to do my thing. Headaches and stomach aches were frequent signals of how tense I was during this time. I also read a book called The Successful Dyslexic, and there were many tragic stories. For example, my sister and I, both dyslexic, have mental health issues because of school. I think it is largely due to dyslexia in terms of self-esteem, confidence and behavioural problems. Sandeep Bahuta. Students spend 1,528 days at primary school, 940 days at secondary school, 39% of your life up to the age of 18. If you include ECE from your first birthday, over half your life you have been in an institution. Each school avoidance comes with a story. I'm going to quote a UK paper. It found that 94.3% of school avoidance comes with emotional distress, and that distress was often long-term, and that 92.1% of these students were described as neurodivergent. According to media and David Seymour's rhetoric, in New Zealand we too have a school absence problem. It is portrayed as irresponsible parenting, so we fine parents. It is also portrayed as an economic problem. But how much school avoidance in New Zealand also has the story of emotional stress of parents and students. Just last week I was talking to someone and they let on that their daughter, who's 16, had just pulled out of school and enrolled in Te Kura. And then there are the students who just hate school. We are sending people to spend a minimum of 12 years in an institution that they hate. If I hate a job, I quit. I have power of my life, but we deny this ability, right, of some other people based on age. Current schooling does not suit all people. So what does self-directed education look like? Well, it can occur naturally. This is a group of age and neurodiverse boys. They met maybe an hour before this photo, and they are making a boat. As a team building exercise, this was textbook awesome. Everyone adding, listening, encouraging, building on each other's input. This activity lasted probably an hour or so, and they carried it down to the river where it sank. This was not considered a failure, but as a source of more conversation and river play, and one of the children repeated the very same exercise the next day. Self-directed education can be practiced individually, of course, as in unschooling, where homeschool students are allowed to follow their own interests. Although the contract is between an individual parent and the education department, education can often take the form of opt-in classes, like schools have experts in particular fields who come and talk to them, social groups and cooperatives, etc. Self-directed education can be practiced within classrooms, within schools that use play-based learning, or where schools give students agency, inquiry learning, passion projects. I would recommend reading this playbook for self-directed learning on how you can integrate elements of self-directed learning into classes. They define self-directed learning as when learners, in the context of an interdependent community of peers, trained educators and caring adults, choose the processes, content, skills, learning pathways and outcomes of learning with the guidance, accountability and support of others in service of finding a calling that will change their communities and the world. There are also schools where self-directed education is the foundation of the school, like Summerhill, the Sudbury schools in the USA. These are democratic schools. This means a school where the kids make the decisions on budgets, hiring, bringing in experts, furniture, bullying, what class are available, whether they'll attend. They run the school. Imagine the life skills you would get from this. I thought I'd use a controversial example of self-directed learning. Letting children choose when to read, be that 3 or 16. It is obvious to everyone, even small children, that reading is essential to function in our society. My child started to learn to read at 3. Woohoo is what I thought, because, well, I love reading. Her whole family does. Then she stopped. I had to let her choose when to learn. She's very assertive over her own learning. Then at 7, she went into her room with that book, Madeline, with the girls in the straight lines, and went over it. She knew it by heart. I saw her pointing, and then she did it again and again. Then within 2 months, she was reading chapter books. If you were to ask her who taught her to read, she will say she did. What a powerful thought. Letting the child decide when to read doesn't preclude phonics instruction if the child needs it. Child I know at 8 realised that he needed assistance with learning to read. His mother employed an expert. They worked together, they addressed those gaps, and he became a reader. A post on the University of Cambridge site set in 2012 quotes some research that I haven't found that was done in New Zealand, where 2 groups of children who started formalised reading instruction either at 5 or 7 were found to show no difference in literacy at 11. There is an article in Psychology Today on the research conducted on students at a Sudbury school who learnt to read while doing their own thing. Their ages range from 4 to 14. Some went straight to fluent, some slowly, some used phonics and asked for help, and others just picked it up. I've included a website of the student's perspective in the references and a review of Harriet's book. But what does this mean for the neurodivergent? Self-directed education starts with the person as they are. It has no use of the medical model, as the emphasis is on meeting each child as an individual. The person becomes before any label. After all, if you've met one neurodivergent person, you've met one neurodivergent person. All difference is about comparisons and expectations. Self-directed education removes this. It is about individual interests, individual learning from self-chosen activities and life. People are working where their psychological need for autonomy and competence are, their zone of proximal development, aiming for that Cheminsky flow, which is something we all enjoy. There is no testing, unless the student wants it. In self-directed education, there are no comparisons. School is a particular kind of environment with particular rules, and lots of these are particularly hard for neurodivergent people. It is the interaction between environment and the child that causes conflict and failure. With self-directed education, it is about changing the environment to fit the child, accept the child, their interests, how they learn, adapt the environment to reflect this. To quote Naomi Fisher in A Different Way to Learn, Neurodiversity and the Self-Directed Education, she says, the neurodiversity paradigm takes a different stance. It says all humans are different, and some of them are not suited to particular environments, but thrive in others. Rather than trying to change the people, let's look at what needs to change around them. Now we come to the hard bit, the problems, the role of the teacher, which is the main barrier to self-directed education. How many of you may have had a sharp intake of breath when told that children should be allowed to learn to read when they want and they can do it themselves? I confess it was so hard as a primary school teacher to let my child choose, and I got a lot of negative comments on doing this. And then when she became fluent, in a matter of months, I heard, but she's gifted, not that it was her work. I know several children who bear the scars of having gone through reading recovery like she might have. Perhaps you're questioning just what does the teacher do? It's a challenging thought that all the time and effort that is put into schools, and they might just be a waste of time and certainly damaging to some people. There are many roles for teachers in self-directed education. This paper looked at the difference in educational gains by having 5 to 7 minute one-on-one conversations every day and found a statistically significant improvement. Even better, the students perceived one-on-one conversations as helpful and self-identified gains in self-reflection and independence. Of course, this was in a school context. In the context of everyone out, I have found children like and want to talk about their thinking, often opting to talk to someone older. We make a point of employing teenagers. I once had the best fun and most literate discussion with a 10-year-old boy over books. This included the motives of the authors, themes, feelings, questioning the setting, etc. I ended up rereading To Kill a Mockingbird after our discussion. I recommended a book to him and told his parents this, and was informed that he was severely dyslexic and could not read, only ever listen to books. This child showed me in this conversation his high level of comprehension, his advanced literacy and his compassion with the characters, but he is failing in the school system. I am so busy all day with fetching things, helping some kids settle, pretending to solve problems, and some actual solving, and a lot of talking. Lots of metacognition conversations, science, space conversations well above my understanding, suggestions. I even taught a kid to crochet once with a handmade bamboo needle. He still crochets apparently, and has revolutionised car trips. Of course, your intake of breath could have been that children won't do things that are hard. Teachers have to push them. Kids don't challenge themselves. In 1999, a researcher called Sugata Mita put computers in walls and slums. He made it so that they were low down and had shade umbrellas, so extremely uncomfortable for adults. And he left the kids to it and made observations on the learning communities they created and how they went from no knowledge to competent use, which they did, and in a short time. Or you could be worried about the drastic change in the power dynamic. I know better, I'm the adult. Do we? What about climate change, overwork, pollution, plastic? We know that the world that today's students are in is totally different to the world that we grew up in. I have as much an idea of what the future will be like as my child, and she still has imagination and open mind, and she has much more of an investment in the future being successful. She has more skin in the game. Of course, another problem with self-directed education is the non-standardised end product, that the diversity of outcomes are hard to measure. Saying that, of course, lots of self-directed educated kids do standardised qualifications. Aotea Whiti, a multi-age self-directed school in Christchurch, helps their students to achieve in this way as well as individuals. This particular problem also affects research into the outcomes of self-directed education, with schools setting the benchmarks of what a successful education is, e.g. achievement of a particular testing regime, NCEA, masters, etc. They are assessing what they are in the market to deliver, not assessing the whole possibility of outcomes. Most research is focused within the school system. For an example, in a paper about the challenges in cognitive flexibility and hypothesis making across human life history, from childhood through adolescence to adulthood, the authors acknowledge that schooling may affect this, in this case to restrict theorising and creativity, but there was no sample of non-schooled people in their study. In another paper, this is direct quote, research has tended to focus more on how autistic students can develop and change to enhance their possibilities to be included in a regular school environment, as opposed to examining what can be developed and changed in the learning environment. Often, what is said in the name of education doesn't match with what is done. Even, say, within this course. I am being tested on my ability to deliver a presentation, my ability with APA referencing, my professionalness, despite these not being any of the learning outcomes. I signed up for this course as a self-directed learner to learn more about how to support neurodivergent learners. Will the making of this presentation help me? I do not think so. However, I still have to get good enough marks to be allowed to do the research that will have the academic seal of approval, so my work won't be dismissed out of hand. This is a symptom of how we have structured our education system. It rewards certain kinds of thinkings and skills and ensures its own dominance by gatekeeping. I feel there is hope. Did you know that Year 13s who go to Steiner schools in New Zealand do a whole year project of their choice? The ones I've seen and heard about vary from someone building their own tiny home to someone representing New Zealand in sport, researching, planning and implementing her own training and dietary schedule. The qualification they received at the end of this is recognised by NZQA and allows them to enter university. And where does climate change fit into all this? The world is going to change whether we want it to or not. It already is. Are we teaching in a way that helps any young people cope with this? My child has now refused to go to high school and is going through the process of being diagnosed with autism. I suspect so that people outside her immediate family will be more understanding of her choice and of her behaviour. Find it sad that a label is what it takes to be palatable, that we can't just accept and fit around difference. What if she had been able to go to school where she could study her passions of Shakespeare, cryptic crosswords, escape rooms, yet still get help with her challenges in relating to others and have been accepted? We need diversity of choices in education, not one size fits all. To which end I have started a co-op, a sort of resource hub, a makerspace, ideas lab for self-directed learners. I have hopefully put this in the references. I want the last word to be Takuta Ferris, who's a Maori Party MP who used to work at Massey. Not only does self-directed education benefit neurodivergent learners, all learners, but by the power residing in the student, they bring with them into their education, culture, the whole community are all considered an equal, valuable part of being educated. Self-directed education is much more compatible with a Maori worldview and acceptance of the mana of the child. So he was talking about Erica Stanford, and he said that standardised education is an outdated model because it was built for the industrial era. It never involved Maori because it was built on Pākehā philosophies, values, beliefs, content, delivery and assessment. He also said that the skills that are required today of people are creativity, because you can't compete with AI or open information. You can't compete with open source. You can't compete with free and instantaneous information. All of the human touch things are the skills of the future. Thank you.